page number 10 in the Competent Communication Manual. His title is Overcoming Adversity. It will be 8 to 10 minute speech. And Dan's objectives are to inspire the audience by appealing to noble motives and challenging the audience to challenge a higher level, and to appeal to the audience's needs, emotions by using stories and anecdotes. I have a lot of needs. I'll try to fulfill those.
Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters and guests. Today I want to talk to you guys a little bit about overcoming adversity. So there's a saying that life is 10% of the events that happen to us and 90% of how we react to those events. I'm sure that we've all had challenging events in our lives, different circumstances, tough things to overcome. And what we probably all notice is how we respond to those events has a big play in our future and what happens to us. So today I want to share with you guys a few challenging events that happened in my life and how I overcame those and how those events actually ended up becoming a huge kind of blessing in disguise. And I also want to inspire you guys and challenge you to think about some events in your life and hopefully give you some tools and insights on how maybe you can look at those a little differently next time you are approached with adversity. So as a lot of you guys know, I started my professional career as a personal trainer at a gym in Bellevue. It was a corporate gym working with a lot of Microsoft clients. It was a great starting job. Out of college, there was 100 plus trainers there. I worked my way up to be one of the top trainers there. I was making pretty good money. Enjoyed it, but I ultimately knew it probably wasn't what I was going to do the rest of my life. Biggest reason was, as a trainer, you have to be there when the clients want to be there. So you're working at 5 or 6 a.m. for 4 or 5 hours, go home, have some lunch, come back, work in the evening with the evening crew of people that want to come in. You're working 12, 14 hours a day. But I was making good enough money to where I was comfortable, but I didn't really think it was something I'd probably do the rest of my life. But I knew I would be there for a little while until there were some circumstances a little bit out of my control that kind of changed that situation. So what happened is I was actually fired. And to be honest, a lot of people that I'm close to I've talked to about the situation, but I haven't really actually shared this story too much publicly. And most of that is just because of the negative kind of emotions that evoke with the word fired. It's about being fired and you're embarrassed. You kind of doubt your self-worth a little bit. You kind of feel like you let people, around you down. And so ultimately what happened to me, I won't go into all the details, but there was an issue with a client that I was training and some billing stuff. And ultimately what ended up happening is I was actually fired, rehired, and then fired again, all within about a 24-hour period. So what happened is the client came, had a little billing dispute with some of our sessions, went to one of the higher-up managers, and he decided to kind of just make an example of me and let me go right away without hearing my side of the story. So I was fired. I talked to my bosses right after that I was pretty good friends with. They agreed to let me come back in, hear my side of the story. So I presented my side of the story to them. Had a bunch of documents and proof to show that I wasn't in the wrong. So they were like, okay, great, this is good, we believe you. We're gonna bring you back in, we're gonna hire you again, and we just want you to start training your clients like nothing happened, because this all happened within like a 12-hour period, so it's supposed to kind of just sweep it under the rug. So I'm like, all right, I'll do that. Went about my day. The next day, I got invited back into their office to talk to them, and the higher-up manager was in there, and he said, we talked to the client again, he still claimed the same stuff, so we're just gonna have to let you go again. And so ultimately, that's what happened, and I'm not gonna lie, that day sucked a lot. I had just got married with like 2 months before that. We had just bought a house. So ultimately I was a little stressed trying to figure out how I was gonna provide for my family, and not to mention my 2 bosses that had just been at my wedding that I was pretty good friends with. Ultimately didn't really have my back when I kind of needed them. So that was kind of a tough pill to swallow. So there's a lot of negative emotion, a lot of tough things that came along with that, but ultimately what ended up happening is this event for me ended up being a huge blessing in disguise, to be honest. It kind of made me really reevaluate what I wanted in my career and kind of forced me to just put my foot to the gas and figure out what I wanted to do. So ultimately what ended up happening when this happened is I had I had two choices to make. I could go and just go train at like a 24-hour fitness or Life Fitness or something like that. There's nothing wrong with that, but it would have been kind of a lateral move or even maybe a step back for me if I wanted to go do that. Or I had the opportunity to go train at a small startup gym in Bellevue, and that's ultimately what I decided to end up doing because I wanted to get outside of my comfort zone and I wanted to really push myself and see what I could do in my career. And I wanted to share with you guys real quickly kind of 3 steps that really helped me deal with the events of being fired. And the first one is really that my support system. So I was very lucky that my wife, my friends, my family, like everybody was super supportive, which didn't give me my job back, but ultimately made it feel like at least I was loved and cared about, and ultimately helped me kind of process those emotions that go along with being fired. And I was really lucky that all of my clients ended up basically coming with me to the next place that I went to because they wanted to keep training with me. So, but the second thing was just my professional network. So I was lucky enough to, as soon as this stuff happened, call a lot of other fitness professionals, talk to them, get some interviews lined up right off the bat, and ultimately land that job at the small gym in Bellevue. And I'm just a big proponent, I've talked about this before, of just relationships and connecting with people. I feel like that's a big reason why I'm in the field that I'm in, and I always make it a point to stay in contact with friends, stay in contact with people that I see value in and that I like to be around, and just go out of my way to make sure I'm meeting up with them and constantly staying in contact with them. And that helped me a lot in this situation. And the third thing is just my attitude on it. Obviously, I had the proof, I had the stuff to show them that I wasn't in the wrong, and I could have taken that situation and really kind of played the poor me, why this happened to me card, and really been, depressed and have some negative emotions on that. But I ultimately decided, like, hey, this happened to me, I have to take responsibility for it, I have to move on, and I have to ultimately look at this as a positive, which was what I ended up doing, and like I said, turning it into ended up being a huge blessing in disguise. And I actually have a lot of friends still that are at that same gym, and I've talked to them, and a lot of them want to get out of there and are comfortable, but they want to do something else, and they're not really sure what they want to do. So ultimately for me, having been forced out of there was probably the best thing that could have ever happened to me, because I was able to ultimately go on and own my own gym and be very successful with that, and that would have definitely never happened if I wasn't forced out of that situation and I wasn't fired. So ultimately, long story short, like I said, what ended up happening, I got fired, I went back, I landed at this small gym in Bellevue, and I was able to kind of learn the small business side of things there, and then pairing that with the knowledge that I got from this corporate gym, I was able to take both those and then leave and move on and ultimately open up my own gym. And what's kind of funny about that is now recently on social media, the gym that I used to work at, they are starting to run a lot of the exact same programs and the same name and same marketing thing that we're running at our gym. So it's kind of came full circle a little bit. I would have never thought that 6 years ago that I would have been owning my own gym a couple miles from the old gym that I got fired at, and that they'd be using some of our marketing stuff and some of the same exact things that we use. But I'm a big proponent of everything works out for a reason, and everything happens for a reason, and it's very hard to process that at the time when all these negative things are happening. You're like, why did this just happen to me? What's going on? But ultimately, after you kind of sift through that and get through all that, usually everything ends up working out for the positive. And the bottom line is not events happen to all of us. My wife, unfortunately, when she was 15, she lost her mom to cancer, and so I leaned on her a lot during the situation. Said, not that losing your job is anywhere near losing a parent, but they're both tough circumstances. So I leaned on her a lot, and I just asked her, how did you deal with that when your mom passed? And she ultimately just said, and it's always stuck to me, that she just chose to look at it as a positive and realize that her mom was no longer in pain, and that, yeah, she was going to miss her a ton, but she just chose to look at it and cherish the times that she did have with her. And so just that positive mindset and positive light really helped me kind of get through my situation as well. And we're all ultimately shaped and faced with these challenging events and stuff that happens to us, but really what it boils down to is, how do we look at those situations? How do we approach them? Do we let those moments define us, or do we let that event kind of define our future in a positive way and use that event to ultimately learn from and grow from? So I just wanted to give you guys a little insight and kind of share that story with you today. Like I said, it's not really a story I've shared a whole lot publicly, so it does kind of feel good to, I guess, talk about it a little bit. But ultimately, I hope sharing that story helps you guys and just helps you maybe look in the future at events that you have and just look at them maybe in a new and different light and realize that there is kind of light at the end of the tunnel, and hopefully use some of those tools and maybe tactics to use when you have to overcome adversity in the future. So, thank you.